Welcome back to Groundbreakers, ladies and gentlemen. We're at Bay and Dundas, downtown Toronto, live, and I have in the house right beside me right now, man known in the industry as EP, Eric Posner.
How you doing?
Good to see you, man. It's great to see you.
Good to be here.
Thanks for coming in. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's always fun to talk to you. Where do we start after how many years in the industry now? I think it's been close to 50.
43.
I know a lot of young people might not identify with Knowlton Nash who are watching right now, so let's bring them up to speed. They should know about, you know, the television icons. Let's talk about, let's first tell them who Knowlton Nash was.
Well, Knowlton Nash was, his last job, was basically the anchor of the 10 o'clock news on CBC National.
Right. And it's remembered.
And before that, he was a field reporter, primarily in Washington. He was good friends with JFK.
Yeah, and and in Canada is thought of and remembered as one of the real, I don't know how I would say this. I think of Walter Cronkite, and I think of, I would say probably one of the most trusted men in broadcast journalism in Canada. Would you agree?
Absolutely. He was also one of the few icons that this country has. Yes,
for sure, for sure. So let's talk about your experiences with him, because you started out, you know, where you were his right-hand man and you edited his news stories, and then you started producing news stories with him. So let's talk about, you actually went to Normandy with him?
I went to Normandy and I went to England with him.
Okay, so let's talk about that trip to Normandy with Knowlton Nash, and you told you have a few good stories here, which actually, didn't that become the best-selling documentary of CBC in terms of home video, the first major sale of home video?
Yeah, it was a very special time for me, one of the highlights of my career. Not only because I was working with Knowlton and he had absolute faith in me, but because it was an idea I had that I thought CBC could run with. And the president of news at the time, Tim Kotcheff, agreed.
Did you get along well with Tim? Because people say that he was kind of a hard-liner.
I had no problem with Tim. I have no problem with most people.
With anybody?
Well, I have some problems with some people, but with
what does it take to piss you off, Eric?
It takes an awful lot to piss me off.
Let's get back to that. You're in Normandy. How did this all unfold?
It all unfolded basically. I wasn't supposed to. Whoops.
It's okay.
No, it's not. I really banged.
No, he doesn't need to be. It was. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't supposed to go to Normandy.
Yeah.
Because I was the junior producer on the project, even though the project was mine. The senior producer was supposed to go, and the day before he was supposed to fly out to England, his father died.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to England and then to France. So I was basically thrown into a field capacity as a field producer, which I had never done. So Knowlton had to have absolute faith in me, and he did. We had a great time. In England, we went to Portsmouth, and we went to Suffolk House, where they planned the D-Day invasion, and I was doing stand-ups with Knowlton. We're at Portsmouth, right out the water, where all the ships left, and Knowlton's standing right at the waterfront doing a stand-up, talking to camera, and the tide is coming in. And he can't see it because he's looking at the camera. And I'm watching the tide come in, and I'm hoping we can get a good take by the time the tide's in. And Knowlton finishes, and the water's up to his ankles.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And his Caesars, he just shakes it off, and he goes along.
And what's the story that one of the executives said to you that Knowlton walked, and he did have a funny walk.
Knowlton had a...
Was it a limp or a...
No, he just had like this little body motion he did when he walked.
Yeah, yeah.
It was natural, but it looked a little strange because it wasn't.
It was anomalous.
Fluid.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had to do what we call a walk and talk.
Yeah.
With our historian and Knowlton on the beach in Normandy.
Yeah.
So I said, instead of having Knowlton walk on the promenade, which is all concrete and brick, and you can see him walk funny, I put them on the sand where everybody walks funny. And nobody noticed that Knowlton was walking weird.
Tell me about walking through the graveyards of Normandy, and you said you had a very meaningful walk with Knowlton, and then we'll move on to another topic. But he was a very sentimental guy, very emotional guy, wasn't he?
He was very emotional. He cared about everybody. When we would go places, we always had to book in extra time to go. It's like doing a TV. You make extra time because Knowlton would want to stop and talk to everybody, because he generally cared about everybody who ever watched that show that he was on. Right? So we're in the cemetery at Benny-Sur-Mer, which is the Canadian military cemetery in Normandy, and Knowlton and I are walking along all the headstones, and we walked in front of everyone, and we're walking up and down the rows, reading every headstone. And Knowlton says, "This guy was 16, this guy was 17, this guy was 18," and he starts crying. Right? And he looks at every headstone and he goes, "They were all so young." Right? And it really hit him.
And he cared so much. And I think.
But he didn't hide his feelings when he'd hide them on air, but not with the gang he worked with. Right. He was very open, he was very honest. Right.
So you made the jump from editor, because you started out as an editor, and then you started to become like...
I started out as an audio guy.
Audio?
Yeah.
Let's go over the trajectory. So
my first job was as Mr. Music on Romper Room. You know? Romper, Bomper, Stomper, Boo.
Everybody,
tell me.
Again, I don't know if our audience, I think that you were...
They may be a little young.
We're dating ourselves, but another iconic show,
And I was Mr. Music, where Miss Romper Room, whoever it was, would say, "Mr. Music, please." And I would play music. I'd also do the sound and all.
And then you go from there, and then you move into editing.
I moved into video editing.
Yeah, which is where you started to get noticed, and people still remember you for some really, really interesting innovations in the editing room. Now, editing is an art form to this day that people often overlook. Right? They watch a show and they don't always know how many hours go into a few seconds of videotape, a few frames of videotape, and how that impacts the overall show. But you pioneered many different ideas in the editing room. Now, how did you jump from editor to story producer? And at one point, you were essentially a producer for the National, correct?
Basically, I got home from a shoot in Kathmandu, Nepal. Where I bailed out ABC's butt.
How did you bail them out?
Their editor that they sent from Hong Kong couldn't acclimatize to Kathmandu. So I was doing his work and my work.
You're doing the work of ABC.
ABC and CBC.
And CBC.
I was putting in 64 20-hour days.
Yeah.
And I got home and there was a message on my answering machine from Rune Arledge saying, "Come work for me."
Yeah.
That was it. I picked up the phone and I said, "Sure."
And so you hop on a plane and you go where?
I didn't hop on a plane anywhere. I didn't have a green card, so I worked out of Canada for ABC.
Right. And then you produced one of their, which show was it that was you were mentioning that was it was a big time event.
I did the first Gulf War for them. I did a presidential inauguration.
Right.
I did a bunch of sports.
So what's the fundamental difference between working for a big American network, which is obviously, we're talking about apples and oranges because we're talking about huge numbers, we're talking about huge advertising revenues, so everything is high stakes. That being said, what's the fundamental difference, do you think, between what goes on an executive level here on a Canadian network and what goes on an executive level in an American network?
Same thing.
Same thing?
Yeah, just bigger numbers.
Bigger numbers, yeah.
Bigger numbers in the U.S. Everything is 10 times bigger.
Yeah, and how do you think our news, the standard of our news, holds up in comparison to the standard of American news at the pinnacle, at the zenith?
Ideally speaking, our news is less subjective than theirs. Theirs is very much, there's a subjective nature to all their news and a sensational nature to all their news, and a hidden agenda.
Right.
We have the hidden agenda here. CBC has their agenda, CTV has their agenda, Global have their agenda, but we don't have the sensationalism at all. We actually still do tell the story and let the viewer decide.
Yeah.
Most times.
Most of the time. So you'd say objectivity.
Yeah, our news is objective, theirs generally isn't.
Very subjective.
Yeah.
Right. And why do you think that is?
because they have a lot of sponsors to please. And so do we.
But
we have more.
But the dollars amounts are so low.
The dollar amount is so low, and because we have the CBC and they don't, well, they got PBS, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
We have CBC, and it sets our journalistic integrity.
Right.
Or lack of it when they go astray.
Right, right. So it really is the benchmark here in Canada.
It really is. It's
Eric,
also one of the benchmarks around the world.
Yeah, yeah. It is recognized still to this day. CBC News is recognized as achieving a high standard in broadcast journalism, I would say, wouldn't you?
I would.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my time there.
Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed the work I did. I didn't enjoy my time.
Right. How would you say that your Jewish identity has played a part in your career in broadcast television, would you say?
I could tell you a story.
You could. Yeah. You could. Because we have time.
Okay. I began at CKCO TV in Kitchener.
Yeah.
Which is a German town. Very German town.
Kitchener is a German town?
Oh, very. It used to be called Berlin up until 1917. So it's a very German town, and a very, at that time in 1972, very much underground Jewish community, because they didn't want people to know they were Jewish.
Right, right.
So I start to work at the TV station, and on one side is my German crew chief, and on the other side is my Lebanese assistant. And there were a couple other Germans around the building, and I was always wedged between all these people who weren't Jewish. Right? And I was the token Jew in the station. But it didn't matter to anybody that I was Jewish. And that's the attitude I've always had.
It didn't matter to them, or didn't matter to you?
Both ways. Being Jewish isn't a big deal to me. In the workplace. Right. I do the job. I don't do a Jewish job.
That I call you up. I call EP up, and just to say, hey, what's going on? And this was I think about a month and a half ago. And Eric says to me, I say, how's everything going, Eric? And he says, not too bad. I just had a heart attack. And I don't know what to say to you. I don't know if you're joking or you're not joking. As it turns out, you were in a hospital bed at the time.
Yeah, I spent 4 days in hospital.
And
on my birthday.
On your birthday, and this is, and
I had a heart.
I didn't know what to say.
I had a heart attack for my birthday. It's not what I had in mind.
It's not. Listen, we don't always get what we wish for.
No, but you roll with what you get.
You roll with what you get, and then as you remember, so Eric says, "No big deal, just a heart attack. You know, it's not going to kill me." And I say, then I gave you the link to a synagogue, right, that streams online, and I had you watching a Shabbos service. I take credit for bringing you to synagogue after a heart attack.
Oh, that was an idea of mine 20 years ago.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just never got it off the ground.
Yeah, you've had so many.
Mine was going to be called Shut-In Synagogue.
Yeah.
For people who couldn't get to the synagogue.
I wish you continued success in your career and good health above and beyond everything.
You're welcome. You too.
Thank you very much. That's EP Eric Posner, and we're going to conclude. We're wrapping up. We're running late on time here. I want to thank everybody for joining me here on Groundbreakers today. We'll see you next time, same channel. Thanks for being here, everybody. Nice to see you. We'll see you again. EP!